Imagine a man so rich that when he traveled, he accidentally crashed entire economies. A man whose wealth was so massive, historians today say we can't even calculate it. Not billionaires, not trillionaires. We're talking about someone richer than Elon Musk, richer than Jeff Bezos, richer than entire nations combined. And the craziest part? He came from Africa, during the time most people think Africa had no power. His name was Mansa Musa. But here's the twist. His wealth didn't just make him famous, it changed the world forever. And in this story, you'll see how one man's journey turned gold into chaos, power into legend, and history into mystery. To truly understand Mansa Musa, you have to go deeper than just his name. You have to understand the world that created him. Because Mansa Musa didn't rise from nowhere. He came from one of the most powerful empires the world had ever seen, the Mali Empire. And this was not just another kingdom with a king and a crown. This was a superpower of its time. At its peak, the Mali Empire stretched across vast lands in West Africa, covering parts of what we now call Mali, Senegal, Niger, and Guinea. But here's what made it truly terrifying in terms of power. It wasn't just the size of the land. It was what was hidden beneath that land. Gold. Not small amounts, not scattered pieces, but massive, rich gold deposits that the rest of the world depended on. At that time in history, gold wasn't just for jewelry or decoration. Gold was money. It was used to trade goods, pay armies, build alliances, and show dominance. Empires rose because of gold and fell when they lost it. And the Mali Empire? It sat right at the center of it all. Caravans loaded with salt, ivory, and goods traveled across the Sahara Desert, but the most important thing they carried was gold from Mali. These trade routes connected West Africa to North Africa, the Middle East, and even parts of Europe. So whenever gold appeared in markets in places like Cairo or beyond, there's a very strong chance it originally came from the Mali Empire. Some historians even believe that during Mansa Musa's time, a huge percentage of the world's gold supply, possibly close to half, came from this region. Think about that for a second. If gold was the backbone of the global economy, then Mali wasn't just rich, it was controlling the system. This meant that the ruler of Mali didn't just have local power, he had influence that stretched across continents. Kings, traders, and empires indirectly depended on the resources from his land. So when you imagine Mansa Musa sitting on his throne, don't just picture a king ruling a country. Picture a man sitting at the center of global wealth, a man whose land fed the economies of distant nations, a man whose power wasn't just measured in land or armies, but in the very substance the world used as money. And that is what made his story so unbelievable.
Mansa Musa didn't fight his way to power. He didn't lead a rebellion. He didn't overthrow a rival king. In fact, his rise to the throne is one of the strangest in history. Before him ruled a man named Abu Bakr II, a ruler unlike any other. He wasn't obsessed with war or wealth. He was obsessed with the unknown. At the time, the Atlantic Ocean was a mystery. To most people, it was seen as a dangerous, endless body of water, but Abu Bakr II believed something was out there. Not just more land, but possibly an entirely new world waiting to be discovered. And this belief consumed him, so much that he made a shocking decision. He gave up his throne. He handed power over, gathered a fleet of ships, loaded them with supplies, and took hundreds, maybe thousands of men with him. His mission? To sail west, beyond the horizon, and find what no one else had ever seen. The ships disappeared into the ocean, and that was the last time anyone ever saw him. No survivors returned. No message was sent back. No trace was ever found. It was as if he vanished from history itself. And just like that, the throne was empty. Power fell into the hands of Mansa Musa, a quiet, unknown figure at the time who had no idea he was about to become one of the most powerful and legendary rulers the world would ever know. Mansa Musa's wealth wasn't like modern wealth. It wasn't stored in bank accounts. It wasn't measured in stocks or tech companies. Today, billionaires build fortunes through businesses, investments, and digital empires. But Mansa Musa, his power came from something far more real and far more unstoppable. He controlled the source of wealth itself. The Mali Empire sat on some of the richest gold deposits on Earth, and during that time, gold wasn't just valuable, it was the foundation of the global economy. Musa didn't just own gold, he controlled the mines where it was taken from the ground. He controlled the trade routes that moved it across the Sahara, and he controlled the taxes placed on every trader who passed through his land. Imagine this, every caravan crossing the desert, every merchant carrying goods, every deal made with gold, a portion of it flowed back to him. Salt traders, ivory merchants, and gold dealers all depended on his empire to survive. This meant his wealth wasn't just growing, it was constantly being fed by the movement of an entire economic system. That's why historians today struggle to measure how rich he really was, because you can't easily convert control over global resources into a simple number. If you tried to calculate it in today's money, it wouldn't just be billions or even trillions. It would be a number so large it almost stops making sense. And that's why many believe there may never be anyone as rich as Mansa Musa again. Then came the moment that would make his name echo through history forever. In 1324, Mansa Musa set out on the Hajj, a journey meant to be spiritual, personal, and humble. But nothing about Mansa Musa was ordinary, and this journey quickly turned into something the world had never seen before. His caravan was not just large, it was overwhelming. Thousands of soldiers marched in organized formation. Hundreds of servants followed, and long lines of camels carried heavy loads of pure gold across the desert. Slaves dressed in fine silk walked alongside musicians, officials, and scholars, creating a moving display of power, culture, and unimaginable wealth. The caravan stretched for miles, cutting through the desert like a golden river. Every city he passed through came to a standstill. People rushed out just to witness it. Some stared in shock, unable to believe such wealth could exist. Others thought it was an illusion until they saw the gold with their own eyes. And then Mansa Musa began to give it away. Not small gifts, but massive amounts of gold, handed out freely to the poor, to local leaders, and even to strangers he had never met. At first, it seemed like pure generosity, the act of a kind and powerful ruler. But slowly, quietly, something began to go wrong. If you're enjoying this story and want more real-life stories that feel like movies, take 1 second to hit the like button. It really helps the video reach more people. And if you love deep, powerful history like this, subscribe now and follow the channel, because the next part of this story, it gets even crazier. When Mansa Musa arrived in Cairo, everything changed. His generosity didn't slow down. In fact, it became even more extreme. He gave away so much gold to the people of the city that something unexpected began to happen. The market simply couldn't handle it. Here's the problem. When too much of something valuable is suddenly everywhere, it stops being rare. And when it stops being rare, it loses value. That's exactly what happened to gold in Cairo. As Musa continued to distribute massive amounts of it, the value of gold began to drop rapidly. Prices of goods went up, money lost its stability, and trade across the region started to suffer. What once symbolized wealth and power became less reliable almost overnight. This wasn't a small, temporary issue. The effects lasted for years, disrupting the economy long after Musa had moved on. Think about that. One man, simply by giving away his wealth, caused a ripple effect that damaged an entire financial system. And when Mansa Musa finally realized what he had done, he tried to fix it. He began buying back gold from the markets, even borrowing it at high interest to reduce the amount in circulation. But by then, the damage had already spread too far, and the economy had already been shaken.
But Mansa Musa was more than just a wealthy king. He was a builder, a thinker, and a visionary who understood that true power wasn't just about gold, it was about knowledge and influence. When he returned to the Mali Empire, he didn't just sit on his wealth. Instead, he began investing in something far more lasting: education and culture. He transformed cities like Timbuktu into one of the greatest centers of learning in the world at the time. He funded the construction of grand mosques, established universities, and filled libraries with thousands of manuscripts. These were not just buildings, they were places where ideas were exchanged, knowledge was preserved, and future leaders were shaped. Scholars, writers, and students traveled from across Africa and the Middle East just to study there, turning Timbuktu into a global intellectual hub. In some cases, books and knowledge became more valuable than gold itself. This wasn't just a king showing off his wealth, it was a ruler building a legacy that would outlive him, proving that true greatness is not just what you own, but what you leave behind. After his legendary journey, the world could no longer ignore the wealth and power of Africa. For centuries, much of Europe had only vague ideas about the continent, often seeing it as distant and mysterious. But Mansa Musa's pilgrimage changed everything. European scholars and map makers began to take notice. The Mali Empire, once just a name on the edge of their maps, now demanded attention. Cartographers started accurately drawing its borders, showing the vast territory and the rich resources it controlled. And in some of the most famous maps of the time, Mansa Musa himself was depicted. He was shown sitting proudly on a throne, holding a large nugget of gold in his hand, a striking symbol of wealth that most Europeans could hardly imagine. This wasn't just a decorative image, it was a message. Africa was powerful, organized, and prosperous. For many outside the continent, this was their first real introduction to its influence, its wealth, and the remarkable rulers like Mansa Musa who shaped history long before modern empires rose in Europe. His story traveled faster than any army or trade route. It became legend, inspiring awe across continents. Mansa Musa's story is not just about money, it's about influence, about how one person can change the way the world works. From a king who inherited power to a legend who reshaped entire economies, his life shows the impact wealth and vision can have on history. Even today, his story raises a question: will anyone ever be that rich again? If this story surprised you, comment below, "Richest man ever," and tell me what shocked you the most.